Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Compliance Lookup. In this video we will be discuss anti-money laundering and combating the financing terrorism organization in India. If you have not watched its part 1 then watch it first. These topics are essential for financial security and in future videos we'll dive deeper into how these procedures are implemented, the tools used and the real world impact they have on businesses and individuals. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more content on financial compliance, regulations, and more. Now, let's start the third topic, CFT related setup National Investigation Agency. The National Investigation Agency NIA is India's primary agency for countering terrorism and terrorist financing CFT. Established under the National Investigation Agency Act 2008, it is empowered to investigate and prosecute offences related to terrorism, including terrorism financing. The NIA operates under the Ministry of Home Affairs (MHA) and has been instrumental in strengthening India's capacity to combat terrorism and terrorism financing both domestically and internationally. Key functions of NIA in CFT counter-terrorism financing. The NIA's functions are broad and cover various aspects of countering terrorism and the financial networks that support it. Here's an overview of its key roles in CFT. 1. Investigating terrorism financing. NIA is responsible for investigating cases where funds are raised, transferred, or utilized for financing terrorism. This includes tracking money laundering activities and identifying networks involved in funding terrorist organizations. Example: in 2016, the NIA conducted a probe into the Jammu and Kashmir terror funding case, where large sums of money were allegedly being funneled from Pakistan to fuel terrorist activities in India. The investigation led to the identification of a network operating via Hawala transactions to fund separatist groups and terror outfits in Kashmir. 2. Coordination with other agencies and international bodies. The NIA coordinates with other Indian law enforcement agencies like the Financial Intelligence Unit India FIU-Ind, the Central Bureau of Investigation CBI, and the Directorate of Enforcement ED. It also collaborates with international agencies such as Interpol, FATF Financial Action Task Force, and law enforcement agencies in other countries to trace and block the financial flows that support terrorism. Example: the NIA worked closely with the United States Federal Bureau of Investigation (FBI) after the 2011 Mumbai attack to trace and identify international funding sources for the Lashkar group, which carried out the attack. This included the freezing of assets related to the perpetrators and their financiers. 3. Asset freezing and seizure. The NIA has the authority to seize or freeze assets linked to terrorism financing. This includes tracing financial assets that are being used to fund terrorism and applying for asset freezing under relevant sections of the Prevention of Money Laundering Act (PMLA) and FEMA Foreign Exchange Management Act. Example: in 2019, after the Pulwama attack, NIA worked with the Enforcement Directorate (ED) to freeze assets and seize properties linked to individuals and organizations responsible for funding terrorist groups such as Jaish-e-Mohammed. 4. Prosecution of terrorist financiers. The NIA not only investigates cases but also prosecutes individuals and organizations involved in financing terrorism. The NIA takes the lead in prosecuting cases under India's anti-terrorism laws, including the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act (UAPA) and the PMLA. Example: in the 2018 Kashmir terror funding case, the NIA filed charges against several separatist leaders and individuals for their role in the illegal transfer of funds from Pakistan to India to finance terrorism. This prosecution led to the conviction of key individuals linked to financing terror. 5. Preventive actions. The NIA also plays a role in preventing the flow of funds to terrorist organizations by monitoring financial transactions, regulating the activities of NGOs, and investigating businesses or individuals suspected of being involved in financing terrorism. Example: The NIA has been involved in preventing the fundraising activities of some organizations that were suspected of raising funds for terrorist organizations under the guise of charitable work. It has examined the activities of several NGOs suspected of money laundering and funding terror related operations. 6. Training and capacity building. NIA conducts training programs for other law enforcement agencies to enhance their capability to detect, prevent, and prosecute terrorism financing. The agency provides resources for improving intelligence gathering, analyzing financial transactions, and carrying out joint investigations. Example: NIA has organized workshops and seminars in collaboration with international agencies like Interpol to train Indian officers on the latest techniques for detecting and investigating terrorism financing, such as the use of cryptocurrency by terrorist groups. Group samples of NIA's actions in CFT. 1. Mumbai 20-11 terror attacks investigation. After the 26-11 Mumbai attacks, NIA became a key agency in investigating the financial networks of the terrorist group Lashkar. The NIA traced the source of funds that were used to carry out the attacks, which involved international coordination with several countries, including the US and Pakistan. The investigation revealed a complex web of financial transactions across multiple countries to fund the attack. Action. The NIA seized assets linked to the attack's financiers and worked closely with international intelligence agencies to block further funding routes for terrorist organizations. 2. Terror funding in Jammu Kashmir in 2017. The India initiated investigations into large-scale terror funding in Jammu and Kashmir, where it was found that various separatist groups were receiving funds from Pakistan. The NIA investigated these financial networks and arrested key figures involved in funding terror. Police action. The agency traced Hawala routes and seized assets from people accused of terror financing. It also uncovered links to the Pakistan based terror groups, highlighting the cross border nature of the financing. 3. The Islamic State ISIS funding network NIA has been involved in investigating ISIS related activities in India. It tracked the financial networks used by ISIS to recruit members and finance operations in India. Through its investigations, NIA uncovered the use of online money transfer systems and Hawala to fund ISIS sympathizers in India. Action. NIA successfully intercepted funds being sent to suspected ISIS recruiters and arrested individuals linked to the network. It also confiscated financial assets used in the process. In conclusion, the National Investigation Agency NIA plays a critical role in India's strategy for counter-terrorism financing CFT. Through its investigations, prosecutions, and coordination with national and international agencies, NIA disrupts terror financing networks and ensures that those involved in such activities face justice. The agency's ability to freeze assets, prosecute offenders, and collaborate with foreign agencies strengthens India's efforts to curb the global menace of terrorism and its funding. Now let's start the fourth topic: the National Money Laundering and Terrorism Financing Risk Assessment Setup. It is an essential framework for understanding and mitigating the risks posed by money laundering and terrorism financing within a country. It helps a nation identify, assess, and understand its vulnerabilities to these crimes, allowing for the development of targeted strategies to combat them. In India, this process is integral to complying with international standards set by bodies such as the Financial Action Task Force (FATF) and ensuring the country's effectiveness in addressing financial crimes. Key aspects of the National Money Laundering and Terrorism Financing Risk Assessment. 1. Purpose and objectives of the NRA. The primary goal of the National Risk Assessment is to provide a comprehensive overview of the country's exposure to money laundering and terrorism financing risks. It involves evaluating how criminal organizations exploit the financial system and how funds are channeled to support terrorist activities. The NRA helps prioritize risk based on the likelihood and impact of money laundering and terrorism financing. It serves as a tool to inform government agencies, financial institutions, and law enforcement agencies about potential vulnerabilities in the financial system. 2. The risk assessment process, the NRI process, typically follows these steps: data collection. Government agencies, financial institutions, and other relevant stakeholders gather data regarding financial transactions, criminal activities, and vulnerabilities within the financial sector. Risk analysis. Using the collected data, experts assess the risks of money laundering and terrorism financing in various sectors such as banking, real estate, casinos, and non-profits. They also evaluate potential sources and methods of money laundering and terrorism financing. Risk rating. The risks are categorized by severity, e.g., high, medium, low, to guide prioritization of resources and efforts. Action plan. Based on the assessment, recommendations for addressing identified vulnerabilities and strengthening anti money laundering (AML) and counter-terrorism financing (CFT) efforts are developed. Key institutions involved in the NRA. Various stakeholders play a crucial role in the NRA process. Financial Intelligence Unit FIU-India. It collects, analyzes, and disseminates financial intelligence related to money laundering and terrorism financing. Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Home Affairs. These ministries are responsible for ensuring national security and implementing regulatory frameworks. Regulatory authorities. The Reserve Bank of India (RBI), Securities and Exchange Board of India (SEBI), and the Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority (IRD) provide data on financial transactions and sector-specific risks. Law enforcement agencies. Agencies like the Central Bureau of Investigation (CBI), Directorate of Enforcement (DD), and National Investigation Agency (NIA) contribute intelligence and enforcement actions. 4. Risk factors and areas of concern. The NRA identifies several risk areas that can be exploited for money laundering and terrorism financing. First, high risk sectors. Some sectors, such as real estate, banking, and non governmental organizations (NGOs), are often considered higher risk due to their susceptibility to misuse for laundering illicit funds or financing terrorism. Second, cross border transactions. International transactions, particularly those involving jurisdictions with weaker AML, CFT controls, are a major concern. Money laundering and terrorism financing are often facilitated through cross border money flows, including the use of Hawala networks and trade based money laundering. Third, vulnerable institutions. Financial institutions with weak internal controls or poor compliance with the MLCFT regulations can become conduits for illicit financial flows. Fourth, non-profit organizations (NPOs), it particularly those operating in conflict zones, can be misused for fundraising and channeling funds to terrorist groups. 5. Example of India's National MLTF Risk Assessment. India undertook its first comprehensive national risk assessment (NRA) for money laundering and terrorism financing in 2017, in line with FATF's recommendations. The assessment was carried out by the Ministry of Finance in collaboration with multiple government agencies, including the Reserve Bank of India (RBI), SEBI, FIU-India, and the Enforcement Directorate (ED). Key findings. High risk sectors. The report highlighted that sectors such as real estate, banking, and Hawala based transactions were high risk for money laundering and terrorism financing. The real estate sector was flagged due to the ease with which large sums of money could be laundered through property transactions, often involving unaccounted for cash. Terrorism financing. The assessment also revealed that there was significant risk of terrorism financing through cross border remittances and non profit organizations. It recognized the role of both global and local networks that facilitated the funding of groups like Lashkar and Jaish. Recommendations. Based on these findings, the NRA suggested measures to address the vulnerabilities in the banking and real estate sectors, enhance oversight of NPOs, and improve international cooperation on countering terrorism financing. Example of implementation. Real estate transactions. The Indian government introduced stricter regulations for real estate transactions, including mandatory PAN card linking for property deals above a certain threshold, to curb the use of black money in property investments. Hawala and cross-border transfers. Enforcement agencies increase scrutiny of cross-border money transfers and Hawala operations, collaborating with international counterparts to curb illicit financial flows. 6. International cooperation in NRA. The FATF plays a crucial role in shaping global standards for ML and TF risk assessments. Through its Recommendation 1, it mandates countries to conduct national risk assessments and ensure that relevant authorities and financial institutions have a deep understanding of the risks they face. Example: India's efforts in cooperation with global financial bodies such as FATF and Asia Pacific Group on Money Laundering (PG) helped strengthen its regulatory framework and improved compliance with international standards. In conclusion, the National Money Laundering and Terrorism Financing Risk Assessment provides a detailed and comprehensive approach for identifying and mitigating the risks posed by money laundering and terrorism financing. Through collaboration among various agencies and sectors, India continues to strengthen its AML CFT regime. By assessing vulnerabilities and implementing action plans, the NRA framework enables India to protect its financial system from misuse, aligning with global standards and contributing to international efforts to combat illicit financial flows. Now, coming to our fifth topic: association with international regional bodies, and it is in combating money laundering and terrorism financing. International and regional bodies play a key role in shaping the frameworks for fighting money laundering (MLing) and terrorism financing (TF) globally. They set international standards, promote cooperation among countries, and ensure that nation systems align with global best practices. India is actively engaged with several international and regional organizations in its efforts to combat financial crimes. 1. Financial Action Task Force (FATF). Role: The FATF is an intergovernmental body that sets international standards for combating money laundering and terrorism financing. It monitors countries' adherence to its recommendations through a mutual evaluation process. Coming to FATF's 40 recommendations. These are a comprehensive set of guidelines designed to combat ML and TF. Member countries, including India, are evaluated based on their implementation of these recommendations. India's engagement. India is a full member of the FATF and regularly undergoes evaluations to ensure it complies with international anti-money laundering (AMLing), ML and counter-financing of terrorism (CFT) standards. India's FATF Mutual Evaluation 2010 assessed its efforts in tackling MLTF. The evaluation led to recommendations for improvements in India's legal framework and financial systems. Example: After India's 2010 evaluation, it made several improvements to its Prevention of Money Laundering Act (PMLAA) and Unlawful Activities Prevention Act (UAPA) to align with FATF standards, especially related to terrorism financing. 2. Asia Pacific Group on Money Laundering (PG) role. The APG is a regional body affiliated with FATF and works with its members to implement the FATF standards in the Asia Pacific region. It focuses on improving member countries' MLCFT frameworks. India's engagement is: India is a member of the APG and participates in regular reviews and assessments. The APG Mutual Evaluation of India 2019 evaluated India's progress in implementing FATF recommendations. It identified key areas such as cross-border money flows, Hawala networks, and the regulation of non-profit organizations as high-risk areas that need further scrutiny. Example: APG's review of India's anti-money laundering efforts has helped improve coordination between agencies like FIU-India, the Reserve Bank of India (RBI), and law enforcement bodies. 3. United Nations (UN) and its Security Council. Role: The UN plays a critical role in the global fight against terrorism and its financing. The UN Security Council has set up sanctions lists that target individuals, groups, and entities involved in terrorism financing. These include individuals or groups associated with terrorist organizations like Al Qaeda and Lashkar. India's engagement is: India is an active participant in the UN Security Council's efforts to disrupt terrorist financing. It works with other member states to freeze assets and block financial networks linked to terrorist groups. The UN Security Council's 1267 Sanctions Committee list individuals, and entities associated with terrorism, and India has been instrumental in pushing for the listing of groups like Jaish. Example. After the Pulwama attack 2019, India successfully lobbied for the designation of the terrorist group Jaish-e-Mohammed under the UN sanctions list. This enabled the freezing of their financial assets globally, disrupting their funding sources. 4. Egmont Group of Financial Intelligence Units. The Egmont Group is a global network of financial intelligence units (FIUs) that facilitates international collaboration and sharing of financial intelligence to combat AML and TF. Its India's engagement is India's FIU-India is a member of the Egmont Group, which allows it to exchange information with other FIUs around the world. FIU-India uses Egmont's platform to share data about suspicious transactions, terrorism financing, and other financial crimes. Example: FIU-India shared intelligence with global counterparts to trace and block funding for groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba. Through Egmont Group cooperation, FIU-India helps identify and block cross-border illegal financial flows. 5. International Criminal Police Organization Interpol. This is an international organization that facilitates cooperation between police forces of different countries to combat transnational crime, including money laundering and terrorism financing. It's India's engagement. India collaborates with Interpol to share information, track individuals and organizations engaged in terrorism financing, and coordinate investigations across borders. Example: after the Mumbai 26/11 attacks, Interpol played a role in helping Indian authorities track the financing of the attack and apprehend individuals linked to the terror group Lashkar-e-Taiba. Interpol facilitated the exchange of financial intelligence and supported cross-border arrests. 6. World Bank and International Monetary Fund (IMF). The World Bank and IMF support countries in developing strong AML CFT frameworks by providing technical assistance, funding, and capacity building programs. It's India's engagement. India has worked with the World Bank and IMF to improve its legal frameworks and strengthen financial supervision and enforcement systems. Example: India collaborated with the World Bank in drafting and refining laws and regulations regarding non-banking financial companies, NBFCs, and money transfer systems to improve monitoring and control over potential terrorist financing activities. 7. South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation (SARC). This is a regional organization that promotes cooperation among South Asian countries to combat terrorism, including its financing. It helps coordinate efforts in MLCFT within South Asia. It's India's engagement. India works with SAARC countries to promote regional cooperation on money laundering and terrorism financing issues. SAARC's anti-terrorism mechanism includes the Regional Expert Group on Terrorism Financing, where India collaborates with neighboring countries to counter terrorism financing in the region. Example: India has worked with SAARC countries to address the use of Hawala in cross-border terrorism financing, especially concerning the financing of insurgencies and separatist movements in the region. Conclusion: India's active association with these international and regional bodies strengthens its national efforts to combat money laundering and terrorism financing. By aligning with global standards, sharing intelligence, and collaborating on investigations, India enhances its capacity to combat financial crimes both domestically and internationally. These collaborations are vital in ensuring that global financial systems are not exploited for illegal activities, and they provide the foundation for a unified global response to the challenges of money laundering and terrorism financing. Now, coming to our sixth topic: international cooperation, bilateral agreements, and cooperation. We will see all in sequence with India's engagement. 1. FATF Financial Action Task Force. India is a full member of FATF, adhering to its 40 recommendations on AML CFT. FATF evaluates India's progress in combating financial crimes and works to align Indian laws with international standards. Example: India's improvements in its Prevention of Money Laundering Act (PMLA) and Unlawful Activities Prevention Act (UPA) were influenced by FATF's 2010 evaluation, which identified areas for strengthening India's AML CFT regime. 2. Egmont Group of Financial Intelligence Units. India is a member of the Egmont Group, which facilitates the exchange of financial intelligence among countries. Example: FIU-India has worked with global fears to trace terrorism financing linked to groups like Jaish-e-Mohammed by sharing information on suspicious transactions. 3. Mutual Legal Assistance Treaties (MLATATs). India's engagement in India has signed MLATs with several countries to exchange evidence and assist in investigations related to terrorism financing and money laundering. Example: India has an MLAT with Australia to request evidence for investigating terrorism financing by Australian nationals in a case involving funding for Jaish-e-Mohammed. Australia provided evidence that helped Indian authorities freeze assets linked to terrorism. 4. Bilateral cooperation with UAE. Example: India and the UAE have a bilateral agreement on counter-terrorism cooperation. In 2016, both countries worked together to investigate Hawala-based terrorism financing in Jammu and Kashmir. Their cooperation led to the arrest of individuals and the seizure of funds. 5. Interpol International Criminal Police Organization. India works with Interpol for international police cooperation in fighting terrorism financing and money laundering. Example: after the Mumbai 26/11 attacks, Interpol helped track and block the financing of terrorist groups involved, assisting Indian authorities in cross border arrests. 6. Bilateral agreements for asset freezing. India has agreements with countries like the European Union (EU) to freeze the assets of individuals or organizations linked to terrorism financing. Example: in 2019, after the Pulwama attack, India used its agreement with the EU to freeze assets of individuals facilitating the funding of Jaish-e-Mohammed. Now coming to our seventh topic: penal actions by Financial Intelligence Unit India. FIU-India, as the central agency for financial intelligence and enforcement in India, has the authority to take penal actions against individuals and entities involved in financial crimes like money laundering and terrorism financing. FIU India operates under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act (PMLA) and works in coordination with various law enforcement agencies to combat illicit financial activities. Let's go through some of the penal actions FIU India can take along with examples. 1. Imposition of penalties for non-compliance. Under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act (PMLA) and FEMA Foreign Exchange Management Act, financial institutions and other reporting entities, such as banks, financial companies, and even non-banking financial companies, are mandated to comply with reporting and due diligence requirements. FIU India can impose penalties on institutions failing to comply with the legal obligations, such as failing to report suspicious transactions or conduct proper know your customer procedures. Example: in 2020, FIU India imposed penalties on multiple banks, including private and public sector banks, for failing to report suspicious transaction reports (STRs) in time, or for non-compliance with the Know Your Customer regulations. These penalties were levied under the PMLA. Action taken. A few financial institutions were fined for not filing STRs within the stipulated time frame. If the financial institution fails to adhere to the reporting process, such as not submitting STRs or failing to maintain proper KYC documentation, it could face penalties. 2. Freezing or seizing assets linked to terrorism financing. One of FIU India's key roles in CFT counter-terrorism financing is to freeze or seize assets connected to individuals or organizations suspected of financing terrorism. These actions are taken when financial intelligence suggests that certain assets are being used to fund terrorist activities. Example: In the case of the 2019 Pulwama attack, action taken. FIU-India, in collaboration with enforcement agencies, traced and identified financial links to individuals and organizations supporting the terrorist group responsible for the attack, Jaish-e-Mohammed. Following this, FIU-India coordinated asset freezing actions with various financial institutions under international sanctioning systems. The assets of individuals suspected of providing financial support were frozen under UN Security Council sanctions. 3. Suspending or debarring entities from financial operations. FIU India can suspend or debar financial institutions or other entities from conducting financial transactions if they are found to be in violation of anti money laundering and counter terrorism financing regulations. This suspension usually occurs when an entity repeatedly violates regulations or engages in transactions linked to illegal activities. Example: in 2021, FIU India debarred several entities, including non banking financial companies, NBFCs, and payment gateways, for their involvement in facilitating illicit transactions or not adhering to AML CFT norms. This includes failure to maintain adequate KYC documentation, improper monitoring of high risk transactions, and enabling illegal remittances. Action taken. A payment gateway that facilitated money transfers linked to unregulated businesses was suspended from conducting transactions. As a result, the gateway's operations were significantly hindered until it met the necessary compliance standards. 4. Issuing show cause notices and legal proceedings. FIU India can issue show cause notices to entities suspected of being involved in financial crimes like money laundering or terrorism financing. These notices are a formal process that requires the entities to explain why penalties should not be imposed against them. If the explanation is unsatisfactory or if non compliance continues, further penal actions, including legal proceedings, may be initiated. Example: Nirav Modi case PNB scam in 2018. During the investigation into the Punjab National Bank PNB scam, FIU India issued show cause notices to the companies and financial institutions linked to Nirav Modi, who was accused of defrauding the bank of over Rs 13,000 crores. Action taken. FIU India identified suspicious transactions related to money laundering and terrorism financing linked to these entities. As part of the investigation, the agency issued show cause notices and seized properties, leading to international coordination for asset freezing and legal proceedings against Modi and his associates. 5. Coordination with enforcement agencies for prosecution. FIU India works closely with other enforcement agencies like the Directorate of Enforcement ED, Central Bureau of Investigation CBI, and National Investigation Agency NIA to take legal action against the individuals or entities involved in financial crimes. These agencies, after receiving financial intelligence, take steps like asset seizure, arrests, and prosecution under the PMLA and related laws. Example: Memon Family 2013. In 2013, FIO India, in collaboration with the Directorate of Enforcement ED, investigated the Memon family, the family of the main accused in the 1993 Mumbai bomb blasts, and traced the flow of illegal funds. Based on the information gathered, assets worth several crores were seized, and the Memon family members were brought to trial under the provisions of the PMLA. Action taken. A series of raids were conducted by ED in coordination with FIU India, and properties linked to illegal financial transactions were attached. This led to the eventual prosecution of the suspects under money laundering charges. 6. Publicizing blacklisted entities. FIU India works with the Reserve Bank of India RBI and other regulatory bodies to ensure that blacklisted entities are made public. If a financial institution or an individual is found guilty of engaging in financial crimes or violating the MLCFT guidelines, FIU India can request that they be added to a blacklist. making it public knowledge that such an entity or individual is under investigation for involvement in terrorism financing or money laundering. Example: blacklisting entities. FIU India has, in some cases, publicized entities involved in financial activities linked to terrorism. For example, the Hawala network operators facilitating cross border money transfers for terrorism have been blacklisted and their transactions stopped. Action taken. These entities are restricted from conducting financial operations in India and are under constant surveillance. Conclusion: FIU India plays a significant role in penal actions against individuals and entities involved in financial crimes, especially money laundering and terrorism financing. Its powers under the PMLA and related laws enable it to impose penalties, seize assets, suspend financial operations, and initiate legal actions against offenders. Through collaboration with enforcement agencies, international organizations, and regulatory bodies, FIU India continues to disrupt illegal financial activities and ensure that those involved in supporting terrorism and other illegal activities are brought to justice. So, we have completed this chapter of anti money laundering and combating financial terrorism organization structure in India. In the next, chapter 8, we will learn about money laundering and correspondent banking. If you want to get update of this topic, then please press bell icon of this channel. Thank you so much for watching this video.